The Death World was a place no one wanted to live in. Its skies were dark, with thick, toxic clouds, and its ground was rough, full of jagged rocks and strange, dangerous plants. The creatures that lived there were tough, shaped by endless battles with the planet itself. They were called the Deathworlders, a proud, fierce people who survived by strength and sharp minds. For years, they had lived alone, struggling to keep their world alive. Then one day, strange ships appeared in their skies. These were unlike any machines the Deathworlders had seen. Big, shining, and covered with lights. At first, the Deathworlders thought the ships might bring help. Maybe these new visitors had answers to the sickness that was spreading through their land, or maybe they had new tools to make life better. But the humans who stepped out of those ships were not what the Deathworlders expected. They came with cold eyes and weapons that could tear through mountains. The humans spoke words about aid and friendship, but their actions told a different story. They brought machines that could destroy forests and dig deep scars in the earth. They carried weapons that made the ground shake and the skies scream. The Deathworlders watched in fear and confusion. Their world was dying, and instead of friends, they had enemies. The humans called their big ship the Ark of Salvation, but to the Deathworlders, it became the Ship of Death. Wherever the humans went, life withered. The plants that once fed the Deathworlders turned to dust, and the animals either ran away or fell silent forever. A young Deathworlder named Kyle stood at the edge of his village, looking at the burning horizon. He had heard stories from the elders about humans, how they came from a distant blue planet called Earth, how they had conquered many worlds before. But none of those stories warned of this kind of cruelty. Kyle's people were warriors, yes, but they were also survivors who believed in protecting their land. They knew they couldn't let the humans destroy everything. But how could they fight against creatures who brought not just guns, but machines that could swallow whole forests? As the sun set behind the smoke-filled sky, Kyle made a promise to himself and his people. They would not be victims. If the humans wanted war, the Deathworlders would give it to them. But this was their home, and they would fight to keep it, no matter the cost. Kyle could still feel the heat of the fires burning beyond the trees. The humans had arrived only days ago, but already the damage was clear. The thick forests that once stretched for miles were now patches of blackened stumps and ash. The animals Kyle had grown up watching, great horned beasts, swift-winged hunters, and small furry grazers, were either gone or hiding deep underground. The air was heavy, not just with smoke, but with a strange chemical smell that made Kyle's throat burn. Around him, the village was quiet, but tense. The Deathworlders weren't used to silence. Their world was wild and noisy, full of the sounds of life, buzzing insects, roaring beasts, cracking branches. Now there was mostly fear. Elders whispered about what to do. Some wanted to try talking to the humans, hoping they would stop the destruction. Others called for immediate war, ready to strike before the invaders could build their strength. Kyle had never been a leader. He was young, and still learning the ways of his people. But when the humans came, everything changed. The village elders saw something in him, a spark of fire and determination that could not be ignored. "We must act fast," Kyle told the gathered warriors one night around the fire. "These humans think they can take our world without a fight. We will show them what Deathworlders are made of." One of the older warriors, Brack, shook his head. "They have weapons that burn through stone and machines that swallow forests. How do you propose we fight against that?" Kyle's eyes burned with a fierce light. "We fight smart. We know this land better than they ever will. We will use the caves, the traps, the shadows. We will make their machines break. We will strike where they least expect." The warriors nodded slowly. They had seen the destruction too, and many felt the same anger growing inside them. Kyle's words gave them hope, but the humans weren't slow to respond. Days after the first fires, the ship of death had landed deep in the forest near the river. It was a giant, dark metal beast that hummed and roared like thunder. From it poured waves of soldiers wearing armor that gleamed like stars, their faces hidden behind smooth helmets. The humans didn't speak to the Deathworlders much. Instead, they moved quickly, setting up machines that tore at the earth and machines that sent loud, sharp blasts into the air. Kyle watched from the trees as the humans began building something. It looked like a factory, but much bigger and more dangerous than anything the Deathworlders had ever seen. It was a place that would produce more machines, like the ones destroying their forests, machines that could dig deeper, fly faster, and kill harder. That night, Kyle's heart burned with anger and fear. The humans didn't just want the Death World. They wanted to control it, reshape it, and crush anything that stood in their way. Kyle called for a secret meeting deep in the caves where his people hid during storms. Only the bravest warriors came. They sat in a circle, their faces hard and eyes sharp. "We must strike now," Kyle said, "before they finish building their factory. If we destroy it, we cut off their power." A young woman named Syra, known for her skill with the bow, nodded. "I have scouts watching the humans' movements. They shift guards during the night. That's when we can move." Kyle smiled briefly. "Good. We'll hit them at the weakest moment. Quiet, fast, and deadly." The plan was simple but dangerous. A small group of warriors would sneak into the humans' camp at night, find the heart of the factory, and set fire to the fuel stores. It was a risky move. If caught, they would be killed. But Kyle knew that waiting meant losing everything. On the night of the attack, the sky was thick with clouds, blocking out the stars. The warriors moved silently through the shadows, hearts pounding. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Kyle led the group, moving past sleeping guards and giant machines. The humans had built high walls around the factory, but the Deathworlders knew secret paths. They slipped through a narrow gap between two machines and found themselves inside the dark heart of the factory. The smell of oil and metal was strong. The room was filled with tanks of fuel, pipes, and strange glowing machines. Kyle took out a small fire starter, a gift from an elder, and lit a piece of cloth. They set it against the fuel tanks and quickly slipped back into the night. The fire spread fast, lighting up the factory with bright, angry flames. Alarms screamed, and the humans rushed out, shouting orders. The Deathworlders vanished into the forest as the humans fought to save their machines. For the first time since the humans arrived, Kale felt hope. Their fight was not over, but the humans had been hit hard. The next days were a blur of battle and survival. The humans retaliated with fury, sending patrols deep into the forest. But Kale's warriors were ready. Using traps, guerrilla tactics, and their knowledge of the land, they struck back again and again. Still, the humans' power was terrifying. They brought more machines, bigger weapons, and new soldiers every day. Kyle watched as his people suffered. Homes burned, friends lost, the land scarred beyond repair. One night, after a fierce fight near the river, Kale sat alone on a rock, staring into the dark water. His hands were bruised, his body tired. The fight was brutal, and it seemed endless. But even in the darkest moments, Kale's spirit refused to break. He thought about the promise he made, to protect his world at any cost. This was more than a fight for survival. It was a battle for the soul of the Death World itself. And the humans? They didn't come as saviors. They came as destroyers. But Kale would show them what it truly meant to fight for a home. The battle raged on, but now it had turned into a war of patience and cunning. The humans, with their heavy machines and endless supplies, controlled the open ground. But the Deathworlders, led by Kyle, fought from the shadows. They used the thick forests, the winding caves, and the deadly swamps as their weapons. Kyle had become a legend among his people. His bravery inspired the warriors, and his sharp mind helped them survive the humans' relentless attacks. But Kale knew it wasn't enough to fight alone. The humans' machines could tear through trees, crush rocks, and burn the land. If they didn't find a way to stop the humans' power source, the Deathworlders would lose everything. Late one evening, Kyle sat with Sira and Brack around a small fire. The night was quiet except for the crackling flames and the distant calls of strange creatures. Kyle unrolled a rough map of the area, marks and lines scribbled by hand showing the humans' camp and their factories. "I've been watching the human supply lines," Sira said softly, her eyes scanning the map. "They bring fuel and weapons from a large ship anchored in the sky above. It's their lifeline." Brack growled, his face dark. "If we destroy that ship, their whole operation will collapse." Kyle nodded slowly. "But that ship is protected by shields and flying machines. We'll need a plan that no one has tried before." The three of them sat in silence, thinking. Then Kale looked up, eyes sharp with determination. "We need to get inside the ship. Find a way to shut it down from within." Sira's eyebrows rose. "That's suicide." "Maybe," Kyle admitted. "But if we don't try, we're done. We're already losing ground. The humans will spread across the whole death world and leave nothing for us." Brack slammed his fist into his palm. "I'm with you, Kyle. Let's take the fight to them." They spent the next few days preparing. Kyle selected the bravest warriors, those who knew the forests and skies best. They trained in silence, learning to move like shadows and strike like lightning. They scavenged human weapons when they could, but mostly they relied on their own skills. Bows, traps, and guerrilla tactics. Finally, the night came. The chosen group moved under the cover of a thick storm. The wind howled through the trees, and heavy rain masked their movements. They climbed a rocky ridge that overlooked the glowing ship anchored high above the Death World's tallest mountain. The ship was enormous, its metal skin shining faintly in the storm. It hummed with power, protected by energy shields and guarded by flying drones that patrolled the skies. Kyle's heart pounded. The mission was dangerous, but necessary. Using the storm and darkness, they made their way to the ship's base. They moved like ghosts, avoiding drones and slipping past human guards. At the edge of the landing platform, Kale spotted the entrance. 2 massive doors made of thick metal, sealed tight. Sira pulled out a small device she had found in the human ruins, a jammer designed to disable security systems temporarily. She pressed it against the door's control panel, and after a tense moment, the doors slid open with a hiss. The group slipped inside. The ship's interior was cold and metallic. Bright lights flickered overhead, and the sound of machines echoed through the halls. The humans who had been working here were now gone, probably alerted by the alarms triggered outside. Kyle led the way down narrow corridors, lined with pipes and wires. They reached the ship's control room, a large space filled with blinking consoles and glowing screens. In the center was the ship's power core, a pulsing orb of energy that fueled everything on board. Kyle's breath caught. If they destroyed this core, the ship's shields would fail, and the humans would lose their advantage. Sira set charges around the core, her hands steady despite the danger. Just as she finished, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Humans coming!" Brack shouted. Kyle grabbed his bow and took position by the doorway. The warriors prepared to fight, but Kale had another plan. "Go, I'll hold them off," he shouted. "No," Sierra protested. "We finish this together." Kyle shook his head. "I'll delay them. You get out before the charges go off." With a final glance, the group split. Sierra and the others slipped away through side corridors, while Kyle stayed behind. The first wave of human soldiers entered, heavy boots clanging on the metal floor. Kyle let loose arrow after arrow, each one striking with deadly precision. The humans faltered, surprised by his speed and skill, but they kept coming, pushing forward with shields and guns. Kyle felt a sharp pain as a soldier's blade grazed his arm, but he didn't stop. He fought with everything he had, buying time for Sarah and the others to escape. Finally, the last charge exploded. A powerful shockwave rocked the ship, and the power core shattered into glowing fragments. The lights flickered and went out. Alarms stopped. The shields collapsed like glass. Outside, the flying drones lost power and crashed to the ground. The great ship began to tilt, smoke pouring from broken engines. Kyle stumbled, wounded but alive. The humans' hold on the Deathworld was broken. As the ship crashed into the mountain below, the Deathworlders gathered to watch. For the first time in weeks, the sky seemed less dark, the air less heavy. Kyle's arm throbbed, but he smiled. They had won a great battle, but the war was far from over. The humans would come back, stronger and angrier. But the Deathworlders had shown them that their world would never be taken without a fight. Kyle looked up at the burning wreckage and whispered, "This is our home. We will protect it, no matter what." The crash of the human ship had left a huge crater on the side of the mountain, a scar on the Deathworld's already wounded land. Smoke rose in thick black plumes, staining the sky, but for the first time in many weeks the air felt lighter, less heavy with the poison the humans had brought. The Deathworlders gathered around the site, their faces hard but hopeful. Kyle stood among them, his arms still aching from the fight, but his spirit strong. The destruction of the ship was a huge victory, but everyone knew it was only the beginning. Kyle turned to Sierra and Brack, who stood close by. "We've sent a clear message," he said. "The humans can't take this world without a fight, but they will return. They always do." Brack grunted. "We've slowed them down, but they have the power to bring more ships, more weapons." Sierra nodded. "And they'll want revenge for this." Kyle looked out across the horizon, where the forests still burned in patches and the rivers ran muddy. "Then we need more than just warriors and traps. We need allies. We need to unite the scattered clans across the Deathworld. Only together can we push the humans back." The Deathworld was home to many tribes, each proud and fierce in their own way. But years of isolation and constant struggle had kept them divided. Some saw the humans as a distant threat. Others believed they could negotiate peace. Few had the courage or hope to believe they could fight and win. Kyle's words sparked something in the hearts of the warriors gathered there. They knew the fight was bigger than any one village. Over the next weeks, Kyle traveled through the rough lands, crossing dangerous swamps and jagged mountains, visiting distant clans. Some welcomed him with suspicion, their leaders doubtful of the young warrior's cause. Others tested him with challenges, fierce duels and riddles, to see if he was worthy of their trust. But Kale did not waver. He spoke not just of war, but of hope, of a future where their children could live without fear, where their lands could heal. Slowly, the clans began to listen. The largest clan, the Iron Claws, lived in the rocky highlands to the north. They were fierce fighters, known for their strength and stubbornness. Their leader, a giant named Gorak, had never trusted outsiders. When Kale arrived, Gorak met him in a circle of stone, surrounded by his warriors. The air was thick with tension. "You come asking for unity," Gorak said, his voice low and rough. "But what do you offer? We've seen humans destroy our lands before. Why should we fight for your cause?" Kale stepped forward, meeting Gorak's gaze. "Because the humans will not stop until they own everything. If we stay divided, they will pick us apart one by one." Gorak looked at Kale for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You speak true. I will join you, but know this. If you fail, it will be your head." Kyle bowed his head. "I understand." With the Iron Claw's support, the other clans began to follow. The Death World, once broken and divided, was beginning to unite against a common enemy. Back at the village, the new alliance brought fresh energy. Warriors trained together, sharing skills and weapons. Hunters taught each other to track and trap the humans' machines. Shamans sought ways to heal the poisoned land. But the humans were not idle. From the wreckage of the ship, they rebuilt their base, bringing new weapons and soldiers. They adapted quickly, learning from their mistakes. Their leaders spoke of crushing the Deathworlders once and for all. One night, Kyle stood on a cliff overlooking the humans' camp. Fires burned bright, and the sound of machines echoed in the distance. Beside him, Sira whispered, "They're preparing for a final attack." Kyle's jaw tightened. "We must be ready. This fight will decide the future of the Death World." The next day, Kale called a meeting of all clan leaders. They gathered in a hidden valley, surrounded by towering trees and roaring waterfalls. The air was thick with tension and determination. Kyle spoke clearly. "The humans will come with everything they have. We cannot stand against them alone. We must fight as one, warriors, hunters, and shamans united." The clans agreed, their voices rising in a fierce chant. They had found strength in unity. For days, they prepared. Warriors sharpened their weapons, hunters laid traps, and shamans worked their ancient rites. Kyle walked among his people, offering words of courage and hope. Then, the humans came. Their army was larger than ever before, a wave of steel and fire rolling across the Death World. Machines stomped through forests, and soldiers marched with cold precision. The battle was brutal. Kyle and his warriors fought with everything they had. Arrows flew through the air, explosions shattered trees, and the ground shook beneath the clash of metal. The Deathworlders used their knowledge of the land to strike from the shadows, ambushing the humans at every turn. But the humans fought back with relentless force, their machines cutting through the forest and their weapons tearing into the Deathworlders' ranks. Kyle found himself face to face with a human commander, a tall figure clad in shining armor. They clashed swords in a furious dance, the air filled with sparks and shouts. "You cannot win, Deathworlder," the commander sneered. "Your world belongs to us now." Kyle's eyes burned with defiance. "Not while I still breathe." The battle raged on for hours until the humans began to falter. Their machines broke down, their soldiers tired and confused. The Deathworlders' traps and guerrilla tactics wore them down. Finally, the humans retreated, leaving behind their broken machines and wounded soldiers. Kyle stood among his people, bloodied but victorious. The Deathworld was scarred, but it was still theirs. As the sun rose over the battlefields, Kyle raised his sword and shouted, "This is only the beginning. We will never let our home fall." The clans cheered, their voices echoing across the wild lands. The humans had come with a ship of death, but the Deathworlders had brought something stronger, hope, courage, and the fierce will to survive. The war had changed everything. The humans had been pushed back, their ship destroyed, their plans shattered. But the death world was far from healed. Its scars ran deep, blackened forests, poisoned rivers, and countless lives lost in the endless battle. The victory was bitter, a hard-earned moment in a war that was far from over. Kyle stood at the edge of a ravaged forest, the smell of smoke heavy in the air. Around him, his people moved quietly, tending to the wounded and burying the dead. The once vibrant land was now silent, broken. He looked up at the sky, the clouds swirling dark and thick, as if mourning the world itself. His arm throbbed where it had been wounded in the fight inside the human ship, but pain was nothing compared to the weight on his heart. The humans had retreated, for now, but they would return. They always did. With stronger ships, bigger weapons, and more soldiers, and when they came back, they would bring everything they had to finish what they started. Kyle had to be ready. The alliance of clans was strong but fragile. Old grudges still simmered beneath the surface, and some leaders doubted the fight was worth the cost. Many had lost family, friends, and homes. The fear was real, and hope was hard to hold on to. One evening, Kyle called a council. Leaders from every clan gathered in the ruins of an ancient stone circle, a place of power and history. Torches flickered, casting long shadows across weathered faces. "We have fought hard," Kyle began, his voice steady but fierce. "But this is only the beginning. The humans will return stronger. We need a new plan, one that will end this war once and for all." The leaders exchanged wary glances. "What do you suggest?" asked Gorak, the Ironclaw chief, his voice heavy with years of battle. Kyle looked around, eyes locking with each leader. "We must take the fight to their homeworlds. We cannot wait for them to destroy us here. If we strike at their centers of power, we can force them to pull back." There was silence. "How?" a young chief asked. "We are strong here, but how can we reach their worlds? The stars are far beyond our reach." Kyle nodded, expecting the doubt. "We have learned much from the humans," he said. "Their ships, their technology. We have captured pieces, studied them. The shamans and engineers are working together to build a vessel, one that can cross the stars." Murmurs rippled through the circle. "It is dangerous," Kyle admitted. "But if we do not act, we will lose everything. The death world will become a graveyard." Days turned into weeks as the clans pooled their knowledge and resources. The shamans called on ancient rites to strengthen the warriors, while the engineers worked feverishly to adapt human technology to their needs. Kyle visited the workshops often, watching as crude engines were shaped and hulls forged from scavenged metal and rare Deathworld ores. They called it the Starfire, a ship born of hope and desperation. Sierra stood beside him one evening as the final piece of the Starfire's engine was secured. "Do you think it will work?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Kyle smiled faintly. "It has to. This is our last chance." The entire alliance gathered for the launch. The Starfire was a strange mix of old and new, ancient symbols carved into sleek metal, engines that hummed with human technology, and the fierce spirit of the Deathworlders woven into every piece. As the ship rose into the dark sky, hearts beat fast. This was more than a vessel. It was a promise that they would fight beyond their world, that they would never surrender. The journey through the stars was unlike anything Kyle had ever imagined. The void was cold and silent, but the Starfire pulsed with life, carrying the hopes of an entire people. Inside the ship, Kale stood beside Sierra and Brack as they watched the stars blur past. "We are not just fighting for the death world anymore," Kale said quietly. "We are fighting for every world the humans have touched, every place they have brought destruction." Sierra nodded. "And for every soul lost to their greed." The Starfire's course was set for one of the humans' closest colonies, a mining world rich with resources and heavily defended. As they approached, the ship's sensors detected vast fleets and powerful weapons. The humans were prepared. Kyle's heart clenched. This would be the hardest battle yet. The Deathworlders' strike was swift and fierce. Using the cover of asteroid fields and their ship's agility, they launched a surprise attack. Their weapons, adapted from human designs and powered by their own fierce will, tore through enemy shields. The mining world burned, but the humans fought back with brutal precision. Fighter ships swarmed the Starfire, launching missiles and energy blasts. The Deathworlders' warriors manned the guns, their hand steady despite the chaos. Kyle led boarding parties to the enemy ships, fighting through corridors of cold metal. The clash of alien and human was brutal. Sparks flew as blades met armor, and screams echoed through the hulls. Amid the battle, Kale confronted the human commander, who had once taunted him on the Death World. "You should have stayed on your dying planet," the commander sneered, raising his weapon. "And let you destroy others?" Kale growled, charging forward. Their fight was savage and desperate, each strike fueled by years of pain and anger. But Kale's resolve was stronger. He fought not just for revenge, but for the future. The battle ended in victory for the Deathworlders, but at great cost. The Starfire was damaged. Many warriors lost. Yet the message was clear. The humans were not invincible. Back aboard the ship, Kale stood before his people. "This war is far from over," he said, "but we have shown the humans that their destruction will meet resistance everywhere. We will fight until the stars are free." Sira placed a hand on his shoulder. "And we will make sure they never forget the Deathworlders." Kyle looked out at the vast emptiness of space, the endless stars shining cold and bright. They were far from home, but their fight had just begun. The victory over the mining colony sent shockwaves through both sides. The humans were stunned. No one had expected the Deathworlders, creatures from a harsh, isolated planet, to strike so boldly in the heart of human space. Their arrogance had made them underestimate their enemy, a fatal mistake. Back on the human homeworlds, alarms blared, commanders shouted orders, and fleets scrambled to respond. The humans poured resources into hunting down the Starfire and its warriors, desperate to crush the rebellion before it grew. But Kale and his people were not so easily defeated. The Starfire limped through space, patched and repaired by determined engineers who worked day and night. The wounded were tended by healers who whispered ancient prayers and applied strange herbal salves from their home world. Morale was high despite the hardships, because every battle won was a step closer to freedom. One evening, as the Starfire drifted near a cluster of dying stars, Kyle sat alone on the observation deck. The vastness of space stretched endlessly before him, silent and cold. His thoughts were heavy. Sira approached quietly and stood beside him. "You look tired." Kale gave a small smile. "I am. This war is endless." She nodded, looking out at the stars. "But it is also necessary. We fight so others can live free." He turned to her. "I wonder sometimes what it would be like to live without this weight, to see peace instead of war." Sira's eyes softened. "That is why we fight, to make that hope real." Their respite was brief. Soon, new intelligence came in. The humans were building a massive war machine, a weapon so powerful it could destroy entire planets. The Starfire changed course immediately. The Alliance called a council to discuss the threat. Leaders from all clans gathered in the ship's great hall, voices tense. "This weapon could end us all," Kyle said grimly. "If it is completed, the Death World and many other worlds will be lost." "We must stop it," Gorak growled. "But how? It will be heavily guarded." "We strike at its heart," Kale answered. "We find its builders, and we destroy their plans before they finish." The decision was unanimous. The Starfire approached the construction site, a massive space station orbiting a gas giant. The station was a fortress, bristling with turrets and shield generators. Kyle's warriors prepared for the hardest fight yet. They launched a stealth attack, slipping through defenses and boarding the station. The corridors were cold and sterile, filled with the hum of machines and the echo of footsteps. Fierce battles broke out as Deathworlders clashed with human soldiers. Kyle led the charge, his sword flashing in the dim light. He could feel the rage and desperation of his people fueling every strike. They reached the core of the station, a massive chamber where the war machine's control systems were housed. Engineers hurried to finish their work, but Kyle and his warriors were relentless. Explosions rocked the station as the Deathworlders planted charges and fought off reinforcements. The war machine's systems went dark one by one. As the station began to collapse, Kyle saw the human commander from the Deathworld again, this time desperate and furious. "This isn't over, Deathworlder," the commander hissed. "You may win battles, but the war belongs to us." Kyle met his gaze with steel. "The war belongs to those who fight for their homes." The Starfire escaped the collapsing station just as it exploded in a fiery blaze. The victory was a turning point. The humans' war machine was destroyed before it could be used. The Alliance's message spread. The Deathworlders were not just survivors. They were warriors who could challenge the mightiest powers. Yet the cost was great. Many warriors had fallen, and the Starfire was heavily damaged. But Kale refused to let despair take root. "We have shown the universe what it means to fight for freedom," he told his people. "But we must remain vigilant. The humans will try again." Sira stood beside him. "And we will be ready." The war stretched on for years. Battles fought across stars and worlds. The Deathworlders grew stronger, their technology improving, their alliances deepening. They inspired other oppressed species to rise, turning the war into a galaxy-wide fight against human tyranny. Kyle became a legend, a symbol of resistance and hope. But he never forgot the Deathworld, the harsh land where his people were born, the place they had sworn to protect. One day, after a fierce battle near a distant star, Kale stood on the bridge of the Starfire, looking at a small green world below, the Deathworld, healing slowly. The war was far from over, but Kale knew one truth. No matter how dark the night, the spirit of the Deathworlders would never be broken. They fought not just to survive, but to live free, in their home, and across the stars. The Deathworld was healing, slowly but surely. Blackened forests began to sprout new green shoots, and the poisoned rivers ran clearer than they had in years. The scars of war were still visible, deep craters, shattered trees, and burnt earth. But the life of the planet pulsed stronger than ever. Kyle stood on a cliff overlooking his village, the wind brushing past his face like a whisper of promise. The stars above twinkled faintly through the thinning clouds, and for a moment the heavy weight of war lifted from his shoulders. He had come home after years of fighting far from the Deathworld, battling human fleets and crippling their deadly machines. His people had grown stronger, their alliance unbreakable. Other species who had suffered under human rule now looked to the Deathworlders as leaders in the fight for freedom. But despite the victories, Kale knew the war was far from over. The humans were stubborn, ruthless. They had tasted defeat, and hatred burned in their eyes like a fire. They would come back with new weapons, new plans, perhaps even darker than before. Kyle's thoughts were interrupted by the approach of Sira. Her face was serious, but there was a spark in her eyes, a mixture of hope and urgency. "We've received word," she said quietly. from the outer colonies. The humans are gathering fleets more powerful than any before. They're planning a massive assault on the Death World. Kyle's jaw tightened. They want to finish what they started. Sira nodded. We have time, but not much. We must prepare. The Council of Clans gathered once more, this time in the heart of the Death World's largest forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, a reminder of what was at stake. Kyle stood before the gathered leaders, his voice calm but filled with resolve. The humans believe they can crush us with numbers and weapons. But we are not just a people of war. We are guardians of this land. We will fight not only with weapons, but with the strength of our spirit and the knowledge of our home. Gorak, the Ironclaw chief, grunted his agreement. We've learned much from the humans, but the Death World teaches us more. We will use every trap, every hidden path, and every secret of this land to stop them. Other leaders nodded, their faces hard with determination. Kyle continued. We will call on our allies across the stars. This will be a battle not just for the Death World, but for every world they have tried to conquer. The clans prepared for war like never before. Warriors trained day and night, hunters laid complex traps in the forests, and shamans performed ancient rituals to strengthen the bond between the people and their land. As the days passed, Kyle walked the villages, speaking with families and fighters. He saw the fear in their eyes, but also the unyielding spirit. Children asked about the humans and the battles, their voices filled with both curiosity and hope. One evening, Kyle sat by a fire with a group of young warriors. They listened intently as he told stories of the early days, when humans first came with fire and steel, and how the Deathworlders had fought back against impossible odds. You are the future, Kale told them, the ones who will carry our fight forward. Remember this, we fight not just for ourselves, but for the land and all who live on it. A young girl, no older than 10, looked up at him with wide eyes. Will we win? Kale smiled gently. We will fight until we must, and that is the true meaning of victory. The night before the expected attack, the Death World fell into an eerie silence. The air was heavy, and even the animals seemed to hold their breath. Kyle stood atop a ridge with Sira and Brack, looking out across the dark horizon. In the distance, the faint glow of the human fleet appeared, a wave of metal and fire, ready to crush everything in its path. The warriors stood ready behind them, weapons in hand, hearts pounding. Kyle took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the land beneath his feet. Tonight, we fight not just with strength, but with every part of who we are. The Death World is alive, and it will fight with us. Sira nodded. For our home, for freedom. Brack tightened his grip on his axe. For our people. The battle began with a thunderous roar. The human ships unleashed waves of energy weapons, lighting up the sky like deadly fireworks. Machines thundered forward, crushing trees and smashing through the earth. But the Deathworlders fought from the shadows. Using traps hidden for months, they toppled machines and ambushed soldiers. The forest itself seemed to rise in defense, branches snapping down on invaders and vines twisting around metal limbs. Kyle led the charge, his sword flashing in the firelight. He moved with a fierce grace, striking down enemies and rallying his warriors. The humans' technology was powerful, but the Deathworlders had the advantage of the land and their unbreakable will. Hours passed in a brutal clash of steel and fire. The forest burned in places, but the heart of the Death World remained strong. As dawn broke, the humans began to falter. Their ships sustained heavy damage, and their soldiers' morale cracked under the relentless assault. Kyle stood amidst the battlefield, bloodied but unbroken. Around him, his people cheered, A cry of victory and survival. The humans retreated, their fleet disappearing into the cold void of space. The Deathworlders had won. But victory came with a heavy price. The forests were wounded, the rivers tainted, and many lives lost. Kyle walked among his people, offering words of comfort and strength. The war had taken much, but the death world still breathed. One evening, Kyle sat alone beneath a towering tree, the stars twinkling overhead. He thought of the battles fought, the friends lost, and the future ahead. Sira joined him silently, sitting beside him. "We have come far," she said softly. Kyle nodded. "But the war is not over. The humans will return, and we must be ready." Sira looked at him with steady eyes. "We will be. Together." Kyle smiled, feeling the weight lift just a little. The fight was endless, but so was their spirit. The death world was alive, and so were its people. The victory over the human fleet left the Deathworlders with a rare but fragile peace. The skies cleared slowly, and life crept back into the forests. But the scars of war ran deep in the hearts of Kyle and his people. The losses they had suffered were heavy, and the threat of the humans' return loomed like a shadow that refused to fade. Kyle stood atop the highest peak near his village, gazing out over the vast wilderness stretching below. The wind tugged at his dark hair, whispering through the trees as if carrying the voices of those who had fallen. He closed his eyes, breathing in the sharp scent of pine and earth, grounding himself in the land he loved. Years of fighting had aged him beyond his years. The fire that once burned in his eyes now flickered with a hard-earned wisdom, tempered by grief and determination. He had become more than a warrior. He was a leader, a symbol of hope for a people who refused to be broken. Beside him, Sira approached quietly, her steps light against the rocky ground. Her face was worn but resolute, marked by battles and loss, yet still full of fierce life. "The clans are gathering again," she said softly. "They want to discuss what comes next." Kyle nodded slowly. "The humans won't give up. They'll come back, maybe stronger, maybe with new weapons. We must be ready." Sira's eyes searched his. "And what if they bring something we cannot fight?" Kyle looked away for a moment, the weight of that possibility settling heavy on his shoulders. "Then we find a way to survive. We always do." The council convened in the great hall of the Iron Claw's mountain fortress, a cavernous space carved into living rock. Torches flickered along the walls, casting long shadows that danced as the leaders of the clans took their seats. The air was thick with tension, the memory of recent battles hanging heavily among them. Gorak, the Iron Claw chief, slammed his fist on the stone table. "We have fought for years. The humans have power beyond anything we imagined, but we have something they do not: our home, our will, our unity. We cannot lose that." Another leader, a slender woman named Lyra from the River Clan, spoke next. "We need new strategies. The humans adapt quickly. Their technology evolves. We must learn more, from their ships, their weapons, even their weaknesses." Kyle listened carefully, nodding. "We've gained much from what we've taken from their wreckage. But knowledge alone won't save us. We need strength, alliances beyond our borders." A murmur ran through the council. "There are other worlds," Kale continued, "other species oppressed by the humans. We must reach out to them. Together we stand a chance." In the weeks that followed, emissaries were sent to distant systems. The Starfire, patched and improved, became a symbol of resistance traveling across the stars. Kyle and Sira led a delegation to one such world, a place scarred by human mining, where the native species were enslaved and their environment devastated. The meeting was tense. The native leaders were wary, their distrust born of centuries of human cruelty. Kyle spoke earnestly. We are not here to conquer or command. We come as allies, survivors who fight the same enemy. Together we can resist. Slowly, alliances formed. Small at first, fragile but real. The war was growing beyond a single world. It was becoming a fight for freedom across galaxies. Back on the Death World, the people worked tirelessly to rebuild. The forests were tended, rivers cleansed with the help of shamans who chanted ancient prayers. New homes were built with the strength of many hands, and children's laughter returned to villages once silent. But beneath the surface, the scars remained. Many warriors struggled with memories too heavy to carry. Nights were haunted by dreams of fire and loss. Kyle found himself awake often, the weight of leadership pressing down like stone. One evening, Sira found him walking alone near the river. The moonlight shimmered on the water, casting silver paths. "You carry too much," she said gently. Kyle shook his head. "I cannot afford to. If I falter, so do they." Sira took his hand. "Even leaders need rest. Even warriors need hope." He looked at her, the exhaustion clear in his eyes. "Sometimes I wonder if this war will ever end." She squeezed his hand. "It will, because we fight not just for today, but for all the tomorrows." Then came the news that shook them all. A new human weapon had been discovered, a device capable of destroying entire planets in a single strike. It was still in the early stages, but the potential was terrifying. Kyle convened the council once more. The leaders gathered, faces grim. "This weapon could end everything," Kale said. "If the humans complete it, there will be no hope for us or anyone else." Gorak's voice was dark. "We must strike before it's finished." "But it is guarded by fleets and machines we cannot match head-on," Lyra cautioned. Kyle nodded. "We will need a different plan, one that uses every skill, every shadow, every ally we have." The plan was dangerous but bold. A small team would infiltrate the heavily guarded human research station where the weapon was being built. They would sabotage the project, buy time for the Alliance to prepare. Kyle chose Sira to lead the team. She was the best scout, swift and clever and fierce in battle. As she prepared to leave, Kyle pulled her aside. "Be careful," he said. "The fate of many rests with you." Sira smiled, fierce and confident. "I will not fail." The mission was perilous. Sira and her team slipped through patrols and sensors, moving like shadows through the cold, metallic halls of the station. They planted charges, hacked systems, and gathered intelligence. But the humans were relentless. Alarms blared, and soldiers poured in to stop them. In the chaos, Sira fought with everything she had, her mind sharp and heart steady. They escaped just as the charges detonated, sending shockwaves through the station and destroying critical parts of the weapon. The victory was a blow to the humans, but it came at a cost. The team lost several members, and Sira herself was wounded. Back on the Death World, the Alliance prepared for what they knew would be the war's final phase. The humans would come with everything they had, desperate to crush the rebellion. Kyle stood before his people, his voice strong. "We have fought with fire and steel, with shadow and storm. Now we fight for the future, for our homes, for our freedom, for the right to live." The warriors cheered, their voices rising like thunder. The Death World was scarred but alive, its people unbroken. And as the stars blazed above, Kyle knew that whatever came next, they would stand together, unyielding, fierce, and free. The air was thick with anticipation. Months of preparation had led to this moment, the inevitable clash that would decide the fate of the Death World and countless others who dared to defy the humans. Kyle stood among the gathered clans, his gaze sweeping across faces hardened by war but burning with hope. Children who had never known peace, now looked up to their warriors with quiet pride, and elders whispered prayers to the ancient spirits of the land. Sira approached, her steps steady despite the wound still healing on her side. "The scouts report the fleet is approaching," she said softly. "Larger than anything we've faced before." Kyle nodded, swallowing the weight of that truth. "They bring everything. Their machines, their weapons, their merciless will. But we have something they will never understand. The Death World spirit." The battle lines were drawn along the forest's edge, where the twisted, burning trees met the scorched earth. Traps lay hidden beneath thick leaves. Ambush points were prepared with silent precision. The shamans moved through the camps, whispering blessings that seemed to weave through the very soil and air. The first wave came with a roar. Ships descended, unleashing fire and steel that tore through the trees. Machines stamped forward, their cold metal legs crushing everything in their path. Human soldiers poured from the dropships, their armor gleaming beneath the toxic sky. But the Deathworlders did not break. From the shadows, they struck. Arrows flew swift and true, flames rose from hidden pits, and vines animated by the shamans lashed out like living weapons. The ground itself seemed to rebel, swallowing machines whole and breaking the march of the invaders. Kyle fought at the forefront, his sword a blur of motion. Each swing carried the fury of years of loss and the hope of countless tomorrows. Beside him, Sira moved like a ghost, her bow singing death to any who dared approach. The battle was brutal and unrelenting. Explosions shattered the forest's silence. Cries of pain and defiance echoed across the land. The humans unleashed new weapons, energy blasts that seared the earth, drones that hunted with ruthless precision. But the Deathworlders adapted quickly. Kale's mind raced, coordinating strikes and defenses. He saw warriors fall, friends lost, but also the unbreakable will that drove his people forward. The humans had strength, but the Deathworld had heart. Hours stretched into days. The war waged with a relentless fury that tested every soul. In the midst of the chaos, Kyle found himself face to face with the human commander who had taunted him years ago, the same one who had narrowly escaped death on the starship. The man's eyes burned with hatred and a desperate hunger for victory. "You cannot win," the commander hissed, raising his plasma rifle. Kyle tightened his grip on his sword. "Victory belongs to those who fight for home." Their clash was fierce and personal, steel against technology, heart against cold calculation. The battlefield around them faded as they fought, each strike a testament to the war's meaning. Elsewhere, Sira led a small team deep into the human supply lines, targeting factories and fuel depots. The stealth and speed of the Deathworlders proved devastating against the humans' logistics, crippling their ability to sustain the war. One night, as the team prepared to sabotage another depot, Sira's old wounds flared. Pain, sharp and sudden, threatened to slow her, but she pushed through. Failure was not an option. The explosion that followed lit up the night sky, a signal of hope to those fighting on the front lines. Back on the main battlefield, the tide began to turn. The humans' advanced technology was powerful, but their rigid tactics faltered against the Deathworlders' adaptability and fierce determination. Kyle's voice rang out over the battlefields, rallying the warriors. "Hold the line! For the Deathworld! For freedom!" With every fallen enemy, the Deathworlders' resolve grew. The humans, exhausted and broken, began to retreat, their fleet scattering into the void. The Deathworlders had won, but the cost was staggering. The forests were scarred beyond immediate repair, many warriors lay fallen, and the land itself seemed to weep for the lives lost. Yet among the sorrow was a fierce pride. Survival against impossible odds. Kyle stood once more on the cliff, the battle behind him. Sira joined him quietly, her injury healed but the weight of war still evident in her eyes. "We fought not just to survive," Kyle said softly, "but to ensure the death world lives free." Sira nodded. "And our fight will inspire others. This is only the beginning." As dawn broke, casting golden light across the healing land, Kyle felt something he had not in years, a fragile, shimmering hope. The humans would come again, perhaps with new horrors, but the Deathworlders would be ready, united, fierce, and unbroken. They were more than survivors. They were guardians. The war had lasted longer than anyone had imagined. Years of bloodshed, loss, and sacrifice had carved deep scars into the death world and into the souls of its people. Yet, through every dark night and every brutal battle, Kyle and his people held fast to a single truth, that their home, their spirit, was worth fighting for. Now, standing atop the cliffs where he had often watched the horizon, Kyle felt the weight of that long journey settle upon him. The sky above was clearer than it had been in years, the stars shining bright and pure. The poisoned clouds had begun to lift, revealing the familiar constellations his ancestors had known. Around him, the death world stirred. New shoots pushed through the ash, rivers ran clearer. The air held a fresh, earthy scent that spoke of healing. Kyle's people gathered below, warriors, hunters, shamans, children, and elders, all united. They had rebuilt their homes, nurtured their lands, and forged alliances that stretched across the stars. They were no longer isolated survivors but leaders in a growing resistance against oppression. Sira approached, her face calm and warm, carrying the quiet strength that had been a pillar through the darkest times. "We've come far," she said softly. "More than I ever hoped." Kale smiled, the lines on his face deepening with the years of battle and hope. "But this is only the beginning. Our fight has inspired others. The humans are no longer invincible. They fear us now." She looked out across the gathering crowd. "We've shown them that the spirit of the death world cannot be crushed." The alliance had grown into a formidable force, rallying species from countless worlds who had suffered under human conquest. Together, they had driven the oppressors back from many systems, reclaiming freedom where there was once only fear. Kyle and Sira had become symbols, not just of war, but of resilience and unity. Their names were whispered across galaxies, stories told of the small, fierce people from a harsh world who refused to bow. Yet even in victory, Kyle knew peace was fragile. "The war may be over here," he told the Council of Allied Leaders, "but the fight for justice will continue. We must build a future where no world lives in fear." The leaders nodded, understanding the truth behind his words. Freedom was not given. It was fought for again and again. As the sun set on the death world, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Kale stood beside Sira at the edge of the great forest. The fires that had once threatened to consume their home were now replaced by glowing lanterns hung among the trees, symbols of life and remembrance. They spoke softly, the silence between them filled with the memories of those lost and the promise of those yet to come. "We've paid a heavy price," Sira said, "but we survived, we endured." Kale reached out, taking her hand. "And we will protect this world, and all others, with everything we have." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying the sound of distant laughter. Children playing, warriors celebrating, life moving forward. In that moment, Kyle felt the true power of the death world, not just its harshness, but its heart. A spirit unbroken, rising from the ashes. The humans had brought a ship of death when they first arrived, but the Deathworlders had fought back with something stronger, hope, unity, and an unyielding will to live free. Their story was no longer one of survival alone. It was a legend of resistance that would inspire generations. And as long as the stars shone above, the Deathworlders would stand guard, not just for their home, but for all who dared to dream of freedom.